Hello, welcome again to Media Rants. What is the role of poetry and writing in general and art in this time of what all of us would agree is a decline in democratic rights around the world and here in the United States? And I have someone today with me who's uniquely qualified to talk about this, and her name is Kiernan Detjen. Jean, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I should say you are a poet. You've written two books of poetry, Salt and Soil and Earth and Echo. Is that correct?
Yes, and I have a third that I finished but hasn't been, you know, published yet. None of them are published yet. The third one is River and Root. It's a of a series, but yeah, the first two are in production in mode. The other one is just finished up, kind of. So
And we will put your website address up on the screen. People can go to the to your website and find out more information about those books. You,
yeah.
I noticed on your website you describe your poetry or maybe writing in general as a combination of soft ferocity and fierce tenderness. A couple of oxymorons there, it sounds like,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
What do you mean by soft ferocity and fierce tenderness?
Well, for me, it I think speaks to my love of nature and my compassionate, empathetic side and feminine feminism qualities, that kind of thing. But also, I have a really strong voice for social justice, and I'm very aware of things that are going on in the world. I'm very intuitive that way, and it's been a way for me to express those complex feelings when I write.
Well, you also write some epic posts on social media like Facebook that I love every one of your posts. They're just
Thank
they
you.
really do meet your soft ferocity and fierce tenderness. But where did you get those qualities from? Let's talk a little bit about your background. I knew your mom, the late Kiernan Rosum,
Yes.
who was rest in peace or rest in power. She was an
Yeah,
extraordinary activist.
she was.
And I would see her at some events that I would show up, and I was always just in awe of her passion for the same things that you are passionate about. So, is that how you became the way you are? Was it your mom's influence?
Yeah, she was a huge influence on me. Very strong, assertive Irish Catholic, very passionate woman. But her social justice path was really her most authentic self. And she really grew into that in her midlife and was very outspoken about those things and forged some wonderful community alliances. Worked a lot with Pax Christi and Esther, those kind of organizations doing a lot of that social justice work. She also did a lot of retreats for people.
Yeah.
And even as a young kid, I mean, she was always there to help immigrants and refugees that came into the Oshkosh community where I grew up. And she really taught me through her actions. I really didn't like going to church per se. She was very active in the
Yeah,
Catholic.
she was.
And she had a pastoral ministry degree, a master's degree. So, but what I really saw was how she lived her life, her activism, like you said, with the people, the community, with those that were marginalized. And that is what inspired me. And I would say probably in my old midlife, is when I started to really find that voice for myself. And when my poetry really started to take off and really grow and evolve. And same with my other writing and just
Mhm.
having a voice on social media, where have you, whether it be essays or journalism or poetry.
And you went to school for journalism, is that correct?
Yes, I went to the University of Notre Dame where I majored in American Studies, but my emphasis areas were journalism, communications, social sciences, and fine arts. So,
Hmm.
big humanities fan. I've actually written stories about, oh, the humanities, whoa, whoa, the humanities, save the humanities. Just wrote a piece recently for that for a Wisconsin online publication, which Civic Media picked up. So, it's a thing and it's got some legs to really hopefully be respected again and
Yeah,
invested in more because we need that, especially with AI kind of taking over all of that. We need that kind of that thinking that's at that deeper level.
we sure do. Yeah, we'll talk about AI in
Yeah,
a while here, but let's talk about the role of the arts and poetry. What are your thoughts on the role of the arts, especially in a time like we're in right now, where I don't think any serious person can doubt we are in serious democratic decline right now.
absolutely.
What is the role of the arts in a period like this?
Well, the arts, as I see it, it's the voice of the voiceless many times. And often the truth tellers are the artists.
Yeah.
And it's also something that universally connects us as people, as human beings, trying to understand our world. It's sort of an ancient language, all the different permutations of the arts. And I've been a long advocate for artists and creatives, all the types of arts, ran an arts organization for a while, really to highlight and shout out all of these people in our communities and the creative economy and why that's so important
Yeah.
standpoint. But again, we see how artists are targeted during times when there's encroaching authoritarianism, in times of fascism. These people are often, politically charged with things, and often art is stolen or desecrated or demolished or burned, and it can create fear in people that are trying to stifle people's free speech and just awareness of what's going on. So artists are, it's a critical thing. And also, I think it helps people deal with how difficult life can be. It's a way to express emotions that you sometimes can't express in other ways. And you can
Hmm.
even use words in different ways, for example, with writing that wouldn't be perhaps your normal vernacular or grammar, because sometimes there aren't adequate words in your language, perhaps, to even express what you're feeling. So if you can evoke things with metaphor or myth or just a different way a word resonates with you, a rhythm, it can just say so much more beyond your traditional, history book or something like that.
As you became a poet and a writer yourself, were there certain historic poets or writers that have been inspirations to you? Any artists that
Oh.
you model yourself after?
Well, I am very much of a romantic, and I also am very into echo-lyrical poetry. So Mary Oliver has always been one that stood out to me. And also, she was really important to my mother, and she had given me
Oh,
books of hers over the years. And I also been a long fan of Emily Dickinson and really some of those, like you say, those classic romantic writers. They're really in touch with nature. Those have been the ones that have probably inspired me the most.
absolutely. So when you hear about the arts disappearing in K through 12 or at universities, very often the arts, as you know, are treated as an afterthought.
Yes.
What does that say to you?
Well, it's extremely disheartening. I actually spoke in Madison in chambers to discuss that very topic a few years back. Really,
Mhm.
again, speaking out for the creative economy and why it's so important. And it really teaches children, especially critical thinking, but even deeper than that, compassion and empathy.
Yes.
And if we aren't looking at the humanities and the arts and all of those things, we are missing a huge piece of the story of what human beings are and how we adapt to the world, how we respond to the world. And I understand that, this whole idea of, the whole STEM thing, but there was a movement to say, we need to add we need arts, we need STEAM instead of just STEM. And yes, we
Right.
want more women into technological fields and engineering and all of that. But they early on, I think, it was that work pipeline thing, and they were even recruiting kids in high school and all of that. And yes, there's an interest in that, and there's an economic drive for that. But I think that over the past decade or so, there has been some awareness that some of that was much too boxed in. And we're starting to see people talk more about the humanics, which I just did an article about,
Oh, great.
which is that whole thing about the humanities and why it's so important. So,
Hmm.
and, but it was really disheartening when we had universities like Stevens Point and others in St. Norbert's dropping full chunks of curriculum, religious studies, arts, all of it. And
Horrible.
and it's like, are you even a university? Is this, you want to just say you're a trade school. And we need both. We do. Don't get me wrong, but uh, I think children really, especially when the brain is still forming, birth to five is so critical. We need to have the arts and all that introduced early on and continued throughout adulthood, and allow it for people to process emotion, trauma too. Imagine people that are dealing with, PTSD or other types of trauma. The arts have been very helpful in helping people heal from that, and it's often prescribed by some therapists. So
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
so important. I mean, it's been around since we've been existed as human beings. To take that away is to like rip a big chunk of ourselves away and not say it matters. And so it's really short-sighted to look at people's cogs in a machine that are way more than
Yeah,
that.
the moment we become cogs in the machine, that's pretty much the end of humanity.
Correct.
You mentioned empathy. I'm substantially older than you are, but you're old enough to remember a United States when there did seem to be a lot more empathy than there is now. Hey, can you ever remember a time when this country has been as, I'll call it, empathetically challenged as we are right now?
I mean, no, in my lifetime, this is the absolute worst I've ever seen. Absolutely, 100%. It's just devastating. There's so much grief. I think
What
so
gets
many
me,
of us are
Gene,
suffering.
what
Yeah,
gets me, Gene, and maybe you've observed this too, just the open displays of cruelty.
yes,
What would you attribute that to? I mean, okay, the Trump administration is the most blatant, obvious example,
yes,
but I don't think Donald Trump appeared in a vacuum.
exactly.
So, can you give us your view on what was the context that got us here?
Well, I think you really almost have to go back to the very beginnings of, you know, America being colonized, and all of the horrible things that have transpired since then, and obviously leading into slavery and, you know, all the civil rights issues, women's rights, which we now are seeing also just being threatened. We have our own brand of, if you could call it even fascism. You know, the Nazis studied what we did with the slaves for their own horrific, brutal dehumanization machine. So this stuff has always been a part of our psyche, a part of our roots, our ugliness that we don't always want to talk about. But we have to understand our complex history to understand that these things never went away. And I mean, they exist worldwide. Where human beings are, there are going to be some of these tendencies. And when you get
Right,
someone like a Donald Trump, it's really just a catalyst for people to come out of the woodwork, and what used to be socially unacceptable, there would be enough systems like, I don't know if you call it shunning, but we kind of need more than that, maybe more like the Amish shun people. But there was a social construct where people would keep their lips zipped because they knew that they weren't going to get away with saying these racist, bigoted things, what have you. But quite
hmm
frankly, I think there is such deep bigotry that has always been the undercurrent of this nation, this ugly sludge that has always been there. All forms of bigotry, xenophobia, racism, sexism, all of it just came to roost in someone who just made it okay, in a
right,
sense, and
right.
allowed, because of populism, allowed it to be somehow celebrated. And we all know, if you study fascism and things like that and history in general, the warning signs of the dehumanization of others and how it just happens kind of gradually before you realize it's even there. And people that have been through the Holocaust and other things have always warned and said this could happen again, anywhere, anytime, and to always be on alert for it. And as you said earlier, how democracy is such a fragile thing that we really have to always nurture and never take for granted, because it's really up to us to uphold it. And this is why we're sitting where we are now. And until we can address all of that,
Right,
and look at bigotry, the underlying emotion under that is fear,
right,
right? People are afraid. And I think with this extreme inequality that we're seeing, which is like Gilded Era kind of stuff, and everything's corporate run, Citizens United, when people feel helpless and they can't even have a living wage, they can't afford housing anymore, they start to feel really scared and really afraid. And that's when they all of a sudden, who can we scapegoat? Who can we blame for this?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
become now the immigrants, people with brown skin that are being racially profiled. It's uncanny how the similarities are there for this happening in our history and around the world. And just
Absolutely.
so awful that people just haven't seemed to learn from any of it. But here we are. And thank you to the artists, the writers who are trying to, in their own way, tell some of the truth about this stuff. Because if we're being censored in media, we're seeing newspapers being bought out by interests, artists, at least for now, can say what they want to say. Now,
At least for now.
will they be targeted? Are they? Sure. But it's somehow that last act of rebellion, sometimes it remains to some degree.
You mentioned, Gene, that we've obviously had a long history of this that goes back to the colonial era, the Manifest Destiny, and what have you. What do you make of the effort going on in the Trump administration to literally erase that history, to remove from public education even classroom discussions of these issues? You
Wow.
probably saw in Philadelphia, I think was it last week or the week before, where they were removing any references to George Washington and slavery.
Oh, yeah.
What do you make of these efforts to erase the history?
Well, it's absolutely vile and it's it's beyond comprehension. I mean, to literally want an uneducated population is very alarming. And while even just looking at it as, wow, we need to have the truth out here, and whitewashing this stuff is horrible. And granted, been some of that all along, right? I mean,
Mhm.
how things are presented, but it's a really frightening red flag, if any, more than anything, because it's again, if you look at things that they do to try to, you know, have dictatorships and authoritarianism, that's one of the things that they like to do. People should be really frightened about this, and they should really be getting active at a local level, their schools, their school boards, their local elections, to really look at this stuff and get active, whether you have kids or you don't, or if you have grandkids, because it affects everybody. We want our young people to be
Mhm.
educated about the realities of things, or they're never going to be able to, get this country to a place where we can have empathy and compassion be more prevalent and not have
You
all this
did
brutality and humanity.
you did mention artificial intelligence earlier, and what do you see as the potential impact of AI on what artists do or should be doing?
Oh, yeah, it's a tough question. I have a lot of artist friends that really are angry about this. They fret about it. They worry about it. They don't want to be forced to learn a trade. They feel that's really insulting. Yeah, they are suffering, and whether it's visual artists, music artists, they're really trying to be creative in how they maybe, I don't know, market themselves. But it's just like this desperate plea to, from the artists all the time to please don't fall prey to this. But how do we escape it? I mean,
Right? Good point.
it's just such a, do you remember that article? I think it was Time Magazine or something years ago called Singularity. It was like decades ago, or anyway, it kind of stuck with me and I read it. I might have been in high school or something, but
Right?
some guy had like this electrode on his head and it was like robots, it was like Westworld or something, but it's sort of,
Right.
we're close to that now. It's kind of eerie. Um, I think that we're starting to see places that have, they're trying to have people show integrity for when they do present art, that, they state whether they have any aid from that. But artists, yeah, I mean, until we can pay them appropriately for their work and respect things that are done by actual human beings, yeah, it's going to be a problem for creatives to make a living. I'm
You
worried
know what
about
I find with students, I'm still teaching at UW Oshkosh. I find that the AI tends to rob students of their authentic voice,
Yeah.
right? Like, for example, I've got lots of students who will only use AI for grammar correction, right? Like Grammarly or something like that.
I use Grammarly all the time, but is that really AI? I think it's an app, but
Well, the most recent Grammarly is really an AI generated program.
oh,
And what I try to tell now, of course, I come from this from a
I
different
love
perspective
Grammarly.
because, I teach rhetoric in the oral
Yeah.
sense, right? And so I find my grammatical mistakes to be part of my style,
I
right?
like that idea. I might have to own that.
Yeah, I don't, what that's what I always tell
Yeah.
students is like,
Right.
you want to become known as a unique communicator. And
Right.
if Grammarly is making us all the same, that's
That's a
not a
good
good
point.
thing.
Well, and in poetry especially, I don't like it for poetry because you're not always using proper words and syntax and punctuation. And, you know, yeah, it does. And if sometimes people are fond of using like ellipses, for example, or, what have you. And right. And if, you can sort of tell sometimes when articles are written by a machine, they just have a weird,
Yeah.
like metal, I don't know, heavy weirdness. I don't know. And I'm sure it's going to get more sophisticated because there are times where people are quizzed on a song written by him, like, that's great. They have no idea. Like, it's like, oh my God, how are people going to have their authentic voice? I don't know. I mean, it goes in circles. A lot of people are convinced that this will pass into some degree.
Oh, I
I
no.
don't think so, but I also think, I don't know. There might
But
be,
independently, Gene, of what the AI might be doing to us intellectually
yeah,
and how we write and how we speak, you've written about the impact of the AI data centers.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What Wisconsin is almost becoming ground zero for data centers. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say ground zero for the nation, but and what's interesting is a lot of this stuff happens very quietly behind the scenes, which has been
Yeah.
to do with the secrecy and not really saying what these things are for. And then all of a sudden, people living out in these beautiful rural areas are like, "What's this thing going on here? What's this?" They, why didn't I hear about this? People that we like to hear the frogs, croaking in the spring. We like to hear the birds chirping, and then we don't want this big thing here, this monstrosity here. And and there's the water issue. I mean, that they have to use the water to cool these systems that get really hot. And there's so many probably unknown environmental factors that aren't good for these. And so I think one piece of people really being, ethically minded or environmentally minded is to not want to use it because of all the resources that it drains. It takes a ton of energy to use AI.
Yeah.
And so some people are making a political statement, say, I'm not going to use it unless absolutely necessary because I don't want to waste energy on this. And it becomes a moral decision, an ethics decision. So to some degree, the more people are educated about the energy and eventually if it's using all this energy, they're going to have to put more of them up. And guess what? Some of this stuff's going to be forced through in these communities, especially when people aren't paying attention at a local politics level.
I
And
find that the industry is starting to use terms like, oh, the water usage is self-contained. You don't have to worry about it. And
mm,
whenever I hear that, that to me is like the modern version of clean coal,
right.
right? Oh,
And,
it's
right.
self-contained. We don't have to worry about anything,
And remember, we
right?
always like prided ourselves as Wisconsinites. The Great Lakes and all of our smaller lakes. Like, don't come here and contaminate this. Like, we're glad it's cold here, so not too many people come here. Like, it's a little secret that this beautiful place we live. And I don't want to see it corrupted by this stuff and be like a guinea pig test ground for stuff like this. But again, there has been some actually kind of bipartisan come together on some of this because there is concern again about for those that care, about that piece of it. And then there's also the concern about how it affects like young people that are using like
Right.
chat companions for substitute therapists and things like that. So there's the social side of it, there's the environmental side of it, and then but then you have some people that are all about the economic side of it. That's where the headbutting comes in. So we'll see. It's still evolving. That's a very interesting story to keep watching. And
Yeah, we need to keep
yeah,
watching. I think people will
yeah,
very much wake up to it when they see the impact on their bills.
yeah. Yeah,
right? When the average person's energy bill goes up substantially and they can finally make the connection to that,
right.
we'll
But it
see
might be
a
too late. I mean, I think this time in our history in our nation is probably one of the most critical times to really get involved at grassroots level. Go, check into a city council meeting once in a while. Find, if you don't know who your local reps are, make a point to find out who they are and, see what they're doing, go to their websites or pages. And if you like something they're doing, congratulate them, support them financially. If you don't, speak out, go to meetings, be educated because this stuff can oftentimes kind of be thrown into different bills until no one even knows what's happening, until it's too late. And then people say, well, you had your chance. We had meetings on this. And then you've missed an opportunity to be locally active. Especially when things can just encroach in, like we really have to be involved and aware
yes,
and not check
yes,
out. I know the temptation when things are really hard like this, and it's by design, is to get people to check out, to feel so overwhelmed, so inundated that they just kind of will put their heads in the sand, hope it goes away, you know, but it doesn't work that way.
no,
It doesn't. And we can't just say,
no,
well, someone else will do it. Someone else. And that's partly why I do my writing because I really feel like, if not me, who? If not now, when? I have a lot of privilege. I'm a white woman, secure. My kids are raised. I don't work for anyone but myself. I have some freedom in that. So I should be taking a stand. And I'm also fortunate enough to have the skill and interest in writing. So I'm using
yeah,
just my one little way, using my skills and gifts and passions. I don't think everyone has to do everything, but if we all found one little thing to make our community and our world a little bit better for being here, isn't that really why we're here in the first place?
absolutely. And you and I have been talking about national trends, and we're in complete agreement on what the Trump administration has done. But what about the state of Wisconsin? When I got to Wisconsin in 1989, it was still recognized as kind of like a progressive leader in the United States, right? Before I
Yeah,
got to Wisconsin, I
yeah,
always had this image of Wisconsin as the place where new ideas were going to get a hearing. And I'd heard all the
yes,
stories about this being the first place for workers' comp and
right.
uh, gay rights and a variety. It was like a laboratory of democracy.
Oh, yes, the
Um,
Wisconsin idea.
the
And
Wisconsin idea, that's
yes,
actually what brought me into the UW. I was
oh,
so intrigued by
right.
that.
It has changed a
Uh,
lot since then. You're right.
yeah, so I feel like our state has been on a downward slide for a while. Do you feel that these things are reversible?
I do. I do. I mean, everything is, you know, nothing's ever a straight line,
Right.
I think we're hitting a valley right now. I think a lot of it kind of went downward, in my opinion, when Scott Walker was in office, and a lot of things that happened with the schools, disrespect for educators, and it was echoing things that were going on nationwide. But I think we've seen a lot of blue states turn purple or red. But
Yeah.
I honestly think that with what we just witnessed with Minnesota and their strong sense of community with in the face of the ICE brutality there, and they're our neighbors. They're just hours away, right? I have family that
Yeah.
lives there. Um, I really feel that it's going to serve as a catalyst for who we are. And, we're Midwesterners like they are. And I don't know, I think a lot of people, at least I've talked to locally, feel encouraged by that as a sign. If they can do it, we can do it. We have grit just like they do. We're, good people like that. And I think people are starting to wake up a bit in terms of, they may have voted for this, you're because of maybe their stock portfolio, but was said, I'm a nice person, didn't realize it was going to be this ugly and this awful. And I think people are really, many of them are starting to come to terms with this isn't what they wanted either. And
Yeah, I
so,
agree with you. I agree with you.
yeah,
I think the people of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis,
I know, just,
really have modeled
yeah,
resistance to um, oppressive structures, and it's not done there by any
no, it's
by
not.
any means. But the fact that they were able to get the administration to announce a pullback
Yeah.
that should be considered a major victory for people at the grassroots level.
Right. And there's still a lot of trauma and there's irreparable damage. But you're right. It reminds us of who we should be as human beings and what community really means. And that is, I believe, the biggest way we can fight what's going on. And to get back, like you said, that a sense of having more compassion and empathy and having that be celebrated rather than looked down on or,
Right.
called horrible things because you care about someone. Like that's how I was raised. That's how anyone I know was raised. Um, so that is a hope. And I write a lot about those themes in my poetry, and I often tie it to
Yeah.
nature because nature can tell us so much about, the whole ecosystem of that and how it works in harmony. Everything is intended to be a collective. And human beings have evolved the way we are, quite frankly, because of our skill to cooperate,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is that's why Homo sapiens exists today. And we have to remind ourselves of that. Do we really want to destroy our habitat? We only have one. Do we really want to destroy each other? I mean, human resources in terms of actual people with skills and creativity and
Yeah.
innovation and thinking is so under tapped.
That's why, Gene, I mean,
Okay?
you and I are both intrigued by words, right? And that's why I'm so intrigued by what is called conservative today. Because
Right.
the idea that you could be conservative
Yeah.
while you are opening up the earth to all kinds of assault on it,
It's the
rather
opposite.
than yeah, just the opposite, right? And
It's crazy.
yeah, I don't
Life,
get
right to life
what I
got
see happening. The
tested.
modern conservatism, a
Yeah.
lot of it is what I might call nihilistic, right? It's like, okay,
Right.
whatever is beneficial to you right now, right? Just do it right now, rather than
No.
thinking at least think in terms of what your grandchildren might experience, but
Right.
they can't even go that far.
Here, I honestly think there's something to be said for that are some of the things that people love about Americans and the Wild West, just the rugged individualism and fortitude and grit is
Yeah,
also kind of our Achilles heel because it kind of became this might be to survive. Maybe it was you have to protect your own, right? You're trying to get your homestead. You're dealing with really rough rider kind of times.
yeah,
You had to be scrappy and quick-witted and I think that sort of has gotten morphed into, you know, don't care about anyone else, only care about your own family, rampant nepotism, uh, you know, get off my grass, got a gun. It's just ridiculous because again, people didn't survive without cooperation with their neighbors. And
right,
even the homesteaders back in the day, even these rough cowboys, they didn't live in isolation. Nobody can live a quality life in that way. It's just not how we're wired as humans. So yeah, so conservatism is different. I mean, I think a lot of our parents would say, well, that's not what I subscribe to. But my parents used to be Republicans way back when, and they both became Democrats in midlife, I would say, because
hmm
it changed. Like Jimmy Carter, they loved Jimmy Carter, and because that's probably the most compassionate, kind president we've ever had, but he was considered weak because of his empathy and compassion.
yeah. That's a very good point.
You
Speaking of
yeah,
partisan politics, I've interviewed Mike McCabe, who you may be aware of,
yeah,
and
I'm friends with him. Yeah.
right, yeah, is famous for saying that we have one party that is scary and another one that is scared.
Oh,
The scared one being the Democratic Party.
yeah.
Even if the Democrats take control of the Congress in November of 2026, do you think that the modern Democratic Party is really ready to take on these forces that you and I are talking about?
Well, I think some of our
Are,
bigger leaders nationwide aren't so much, but
oh,
I haven't been, yeah, too thrilled, but I think we have opportunity to do that. I mean, jury's still out, I guess, on who we get in there, but we really have to have some people with some backbone and some, you know, can't be scared. You can't live in fear, or we will be in this continuous hamster wheel. So there's going to have to be some candidates that really have this audacity and persistence that we need. That are going to call the bluff and say, come after me. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. We have freedom of speech here. I'm going to speak out for humanity, for compassion, for kindness, for human beings, for equal rights, and against bigotry, against brutality, against cruelty. And I think if we can get candidates in there and we support them, and I mean, there's a lot of grassroots organizations like Run for Something, for example, that are trying to say, get in at a local level, these small seats in these different committees and so forth. You can learn how to be in that realm, and so we'll see. But I'm hopeful. I mean, I have to keep my optimism alive. There are days that I don't feel it, but I, and then I go
Yeah.
outside, take a walk in nature,
Yeah.
pet my kitty cats. I'm like, okay, another day tomorrow. Let's just have the sunrise
Well,
again.
the election of someone like Mamdani in New York City, who was, openly running as a democratic socialist,
Hmm.
do you think that candidates with that kind of viewpoint is that too far for the Democratic Party as a whole?
Well,
I
it
mean,
shouldn't be. I
it
mean,
shouldn't be, right?
that's my platform. I actually agree with pretty much everything that they stand for. And if you really look at it, most rational, reasonable people, they weren't told it was called the word socialist, I think scares people, or Democrat. It's
Right.
not the same as socialism. But if people would literally take the time to really look up I mean, who doesn't want, clean air? Who doesn't want, living wages? Who doesn't want investments in their communities and the infrastructure that we all care about? It's all basic stuff. But there's just ignorance about party classifications sometimes. But I love what he stands for. And I think he is such a breath of fresh air. And I think people are definitely going to be paying attention to his effectiveness in New York. But we need more charismatic people like that have good ethics and who are respectable and have that dignity. I think we're all craving a sense of dignity
Yeah.
in leadership positions, even if we don't agree with them. But enough of the name calling, the constant
Yeah.
lying, the just insults of people, especially women and marginalized groups. We can't stand for that. We have to have some dignity. People like, remember back when we were younger, people like Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite, we had a sense of dignity in the newsrooms too, right? We felt like we could
Yeah.
trust what the media said. Now we wonder who's bought and paid for. So we
Yeah,
need
exactly.
politicians to say, we have our laws, our constitution and so forth, our Bill of Rights to protect people from corruption, not the other way around. The
Yeah.
citizens shouldn't be the ones targeted by the state. I mean, that's just unacceptable. Um,
Yeah. And I think it is time for the Democrats to realize that they can now safely run on Medicare for all,
yes,
right?
please.
Right.
Yes,
They
we
can
need that.
safely run on
Yeah,
defund ICE or get rid of ICE. The
right.
public is on their side. You do not have to be scared ever, but you especially should not be scared when the public is clearly on your side on these things.
Right. Well, except for they're making threats now that if you go after ICE, they're gonna come after you. But that's
Oh,
just, I think that's how the smoke and mirrors. Who knows? But I think Minnesota has showed us that no, nobody likes this. I mean, they might be concerned about, proper immigration process, of course, but nobody's really going to want people just being shot in the street randomly by people that don't have any training really in that regard. And even some of those agents aren't even getting their bonuses they were promised. There's people start to wake up and go, "Oh, I was lied to." Shocking.
yeah.
Shocking. Um, yeah, so
And people are watching, I work with primarily Gen Z as a university instructor, and the idea that they are apathetic toward all this is utterly absurd. I
you know,
talk to students
yeah,
every day who
sad.
are profoundly angered about what is happening. That I think the problem that that generation has is they really can't get organized.
Yeah,
There's so many. I mean, look, every generation has had distractions,
right.
right, and a variety of ones. But I think the algorithmic manipulation
Yeah.
is so intense, especially by the way with young men.
Yep. I have
Um,
two sons in their 20s, so I
yeah,
talked about that with them and they're on the cusp of it really exploding, but they, and their friends really have a lot of disdain for social media in general and how it messes up with, kids' minds, their social lives. Kids have just been stuck in their rooms. They're living false lives through filters and, Instagram stuff. And they're not connecting with each other, not taking risks. They're
Right.
free to leave their houses and their rooms. They're living in their parents' basements way too long, that kind of thing. They don't know how to socialize. So if they can't even date or socialize and have FaceTime with each other, how are they going to organize politically? But at the same time, right, humans are adaptable. And I think when it really becomes the spotlight on them because everyone's old and that's going to be a huge thing. Think about all the baby boomers that are going to need care.
Right.
It's going to be up to them. They're going to have to be paid, living wages, and they're going to have to be able to have, authority and power to deal with all of the responsibilities that they're going to have to carry a big weight of. And they're going to be really, really angry at
Absolutely.
boomers, and they already are, for leaving them in these dire straits. And that's not a good place for older people to be. Do you really want to be vulnerable to a younger generation that has contempt for you? You should, it's kind of like, what do they say? Treat grandma well because, you don't know what she might do to you. But, and the other way around. So, um, yeah,
No, I see a lot of hope in the youth. I really do. Um, and I do think that the Trump administration has overreached in
yeah,
in in ways that I want to believe that the majority of Republicans recognize the overreach, but I think it's very difficult for them to say that publicly.
yeah, I think so. There's a lot of shame in that, and they're afraid to say it. Some have, um, some just ignore, just pretend it didn't happen, too embarrassed to say. But there are still some that love. I think the ones who really still support it are extremely bigoted and uneducated. I think it really kind of comes down to, or just angry at the world. And, a lot of it's people that want to keep their privilege there and they don't want to share it with anyone else. Because as we all know, equal rights for marginalized, none of it comes without a fight. None of it comes without casualties, suffering, you know, torment of those trying to fight for what we shouldn't have to fight for. And sometimes you have to refight for things, which we're seeing now, you know.
Absolutely.
I hope you, oh, by the way, I
Gene, I
hope,
really
oh,
appreciate what you're doing, and I urge people to go to your website and look up your work. And
do I have time to read a poem or not? Is am I running out of
oh
time?
yes, absolutely,
I wanted
please
to read
do.
at least one just
Go
because
ahead. Yes, do
I
read
write
a poem.
typically longer poems, but I just want to close with one that
Yes, let's do that.
um, this one is called The Network Beneath. Beneath the forest floor, a quiet language moves, threads of fungus linking root to root, tree to tree, carrying news, hunger, thirst, light returning. Old trees share what they have stored: carbon, nitrogen, quiet wisdom, with seedlings finding their way through shadow. Even in decay, they give back what they have gathered. This is not charity, but balance. A lesson written in patience. Strength grows only in connection. Above ground, our own roots are thinning. Neighborhoods smolder with suspicion, voices harden on screens, and we forget how to feed one another without fear or profit. Yet beneath it all, the map of survival waits. Patient as soil, reminding us that life endures through what it gives away. If we could truly listen, we might remember what it means to belong to something living, to keep each other alive.
Wow. And what is the title of that poem?
The network beneath.
The Network Beneath. Strength only grows in connection. Love that. That's
So when I hear bad news, I write because it gives me hope, helps me process, and I want to call out things I'm seeing. I want my writing to be a document of sorts. I am going to register all my works in the Library of Congress for that reason. And of course, make sure my kids and grandkids, I don't have any yet, but I want it to be my legacy. So thank you for letting me read one of my poems to you.
Absolutely. And thank you for doing this podcast, Gene. I hope you can come back again.
I'd love to. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right, absolutely.